It's been a roller coaster ride for the Boston Red Sox since coming back from the All-Star break, but they have made a few moves to improve the roster at the trade deadline. More on today's Locked On Red Sox.
You are Locked On Red Sox, your daily Boston Red Sox podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to this wonderful crossover edition of Locked On Red Sox and Locked On Red Sox Postcast. I am here with host Steve Lenox, aka @Lenox on baseball as his Twitter handle, and we are here together to do a combined show to talk about the Red Sox at the trade deadline. I am your host, Gabby Hurlbut of Locked On Red Sox. And for those of you who are unfamiliar with one or the other, I host a Monday through Friday show, Locked On Red Sox, talking about all things going on with the team. And Steve here hosts the Locked On Red Sox Postcast, basically coming on after every single game to break down what happened in that game, whether it's good or bad, whether they give up 20 runs or 2. He has that all for you immediately following every game. So we are here today to do a combined show to talk about what went on with the Red Sox at the trade deadline. Are they prepared to make a run for the rest of this season? So we have a lot for you today on this episode, which is brought to you by Prize Picks, the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnMLB and use code LockedOnMLB for a first deposit match up to $100. We made it, everybody. The trade deadline has officially passed. And I feel like after all of this time of talking about what the Red Sox might do at the trade deadline for so long and trying to anticipate whether they were going to be buyers or sellers, they finally picked a lane and they decided to add to this team. So we are here to discuss everything that happened and what could happen moving forward for this team. So Steve, so nice of you to join me and do this little combined show here we have going on.
I've been looking forward to it since we put this together over the weekend, and here we are. The deadline is come and gone, and one trade right at the end for the Red Sox, adding another bullpen arm from the Angels.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's always interesting because I think we kind of called it too when we said, I feel like the Red Sox will be one of those teams that makes a move right as the deadline is ending. And you always have those few moves that trickle in a little past 6 p.m. And the Red Sox certainly, again, were one of those teams to make one of those trades. And, you know, this is a team that this season has been in an interesting spot because early on in the season, it really seemed like they were just going to be an average 500 level baseball team. They couldn't really get over that hump of getting themselves too far over 500. When they would get a couple games over, they'd fall back. And then it was just a cycle of them just looking like an average team. And I think the injuries were a big part of that, as well as guys just not really knowing what their role was on this team. Then they had a fantastic month of June leading into July and the All-Star break and truly looking like a team that can compete. And now they've added some pieces, including starter James Paxton, who they received in a trade from the Dodgers. What are your thoughts on him? Because he's somebody who, you know, the Red Sox certainly aren't anticipating to be an ace caliber starter, but they don't really need him to be. But what are your thoughts on that trade?
I loved it. I really did, Gabby. You know, he started 2 Sundays ago against the Red Sox at Dodger Stadium, Sunday Night Baseball. The next day, he's designated for assignment. What stuck out for me with Paxton was when the ESPN telecast was interviewing Clayton Kershaw from the Dodgers dugout, and he's like, this guy's all of a sudden 3-4 miles an hour, an uptick in his velocity. And it was like, wow, okay. And then they DFA him. And I preface probably, and I'll say this 50 times in the next half hour as we're going, it was a move where Paxton comes to the Red Sox, it solidifies, you know, a 3 or 4 or 5 starter. Hey, they've got a bunch of starters right now in those roles. Everyone just has to do their job going forward. But in that Paxton move, and even Flaherty today, we see Flaherty going in a deal, and he stayed away from the, you know, Paxton, Flaherty. They stay away from the Orioles. They stay away from the Yankees. Now that's the division, but you also have to think about the other wild card teams as well. I don't know that any team in wild card contention really right now did a ton to set themselves apart. What the Red Sox did here, they had 2 relievers today. Lucas Sims from the Reds, and then Luis Garcia late. That's the one we'll touch on. And we're still anticipating, okay, what did they get for Garcia, who is a free agent at the end of the season? I'm not thinking it's certainly not a top 10 guy. I'd be shocked. I don't think it'd be a top 20 minor league prospect. But I like what the Red Sox did. They added 4 pitchers, Paxton a starter, 3 relievers. And then they add Jansen as well behind the plate. And it looks like he's going to get some time behind the plate. So what happens with Connor Wong? But in terms of the pitchers, I like what they did. And I think Craig Breslow's first trade deadline coincides with the first draft that he just had in June too. I think teams right now, and Craig Breslow's understanding, we have to develop pitchers. And you saw that in the draft. It was pitcher heavy after the first round.
Yeah, and you look at somebody like James Paxton, and I think what people need to keep in mind here is that we needed somebody who could come in and eat innings, because this bullpen, due to injuries, has just been very fatigued, and they've just been throwing lots of innings as of late. And that's something to me that James Paxton can provide out of this rotation, is somebody who could eat innings and maybe give you 6 to 7 innings in a start, which would be very successful for somebody who is more in the back end of the rotation. And like you said, with people doing their jobs, if you have Tanner Houck continuing to pitch the way we've seen him pitch for a lot of this season, ultimately you kind of found your ace in him. So they didn't really need to me, get a super expensive number 1 starter like a Garrett Crochet type right now, who would have been super expensive for them to acquire. They just needed somebody who could slot into the rotation every 5 days and eat innings. And to me, that's what James Paxton will bring. And he's a veteran with a lot of experience. And I think that could be huge for a team with a lot of young players that is trying to make a run this year.
100%. I think the White Sox lost. If Crochet didn't go in the last couple of minutes as we went live, Crochet and Luis Robert don't leave. And if you're Garrett Crochet, you're demanding things over the last handful of days. Just my demand would have been, just get me out of here. Okay. We're going to lose 115 to 120 games. Just get me out of here. There's more to that story, I'm sure. But, as soon as Crochet said that, and I don't know if they were swimming in that end of the pool, in the deep end of going after somebody like Crochet. But earlier in the day, it was reported that, the Red Sox were going to be in on Flaherty. I think it was John Heyman who had it. And that was interesting. It was Heyman had Red Sox, Dodgers, Yankees, several of the teams in on Flaherty. He doesn't go to the Yankees. The Yankees were quiet as well. And now Garrett Cole, I don't know if you saw it, but he's got body fatigue. That's why he's missing tonight's start in Philadelphia, where you're just coming from. He's got body fatigue. I'm not sold, and I said it in jest a little bit. Did the Red Sox wake the Yankees up over the weekend? They might have had a couple of days here, and they, in Philadelphia last night, they hit, I think, 6 home runs total. But I'm not overly excited about what the Yankees. I don't cringe at what the Yankees did. They didn't add a top end reliever. They didn't go. Skubal didn't go, and everything with the narrative of Skubal. And I'd love to see him within a Red Sox uniform, but that would have cost a pretty penny. But you know what? If the Tigers have designs in competing, whether it's next year or the year after, what they're going to need is a guy like Skubal. And if they keep him and they build around him, then there's one bat though, Gabby, that went late. Mark Canha, and I don't know what the Giants were doing in the last couple of days, but Mark Canha to me was an interesting name. I don't know if it was ever something that was discussed between the Tigers and Red Sox, but Mark Canha's name was an interesting one to me. Late, he goes to the Giants this afternoon, right at the deadline.
Yeah, that's definitely an interesting name for sure. And I saw a lot of offensive names being thrown out there as potentials for this Boston Red Sox team. And they went out, and you mentioned him already, how they went and got Danny Jansen, who I think a lot of people can agree is an upgrade from Reese McGuire in terms of a backup catcher. He's a very good defensive catcher, and he can provide a little bit of that value against left-handed pitching. I was hoping to see the Red Sox acquire another bat at this deadline. However, that was something that I was kind of hanging on to, that I was hoping they would get to help balance out the lineup a little bit more. But I do feel like when you're looking at Connor Wong and who's going to be behind him, Danny Jansen is an upgrade from what we had before in Reese.
Yeah, and the way I look at it right now, Martin, Slayton, possibly Liam Hendricks, you are acquiring players after August 1, after the trade deadline. And the bat they're going to pick up here in the coming weeks. Vaughn Grissom, I'm holding out hope, but the big bat, Tristan Casas, is in Worcester tonight, and his rehab assignment gets underway. So you've gotten to 11 games over 500 with Casas missing a lot of the season. That's going to be a big bat. for them and the addition. Again, it's a left-handed bat. How they go about facing lefty starters, you're going to see it August, September. If they're in contention for a wild card spot, you're going to see opposing teams set up lefties and the rotation so they're starting left-handers against the Red Sox because their numbers are what they are. They're not very good against left-handed starting pitching. But again, Jansen is new to the mix. I didn't see the lineup tonight. I meant to look at it before we went on, but I would imagine Jansen, I mean, you got a brand new battery, brand new pitcher, brand new catcher. I wouldn't be surprised if Jansen is behind the plate tonight for Paxton in game 2 against the Mariners.
Yeah, I mean, you look at the Red Sox lineup right now, and people were talking about how there was a chance that Tyler O'Neill was going to be moved at this trade deadline, especially because of the fact that he's a pending free agent after this year. But that was tough for me to get behind because of the fact that he is a right-handed bat that you can rely on to provide power in the lineup. And it would have been really hard to justify them moving on from him if they truly are trying to contend this year. And then somebody like Kenley Jansen, who wasn't moved, that people thought maybe had a chance to be moved as well. And I said, if we want to make a run this year, I can't justify moving a Hall of Fame closer that
Right.
you're going to want to be in there in close games in crunch time. I can't really imagine trusting somebody else more than him to close out games in the playoffs if they truly are looking to make a run. So I never really bought into, is Kenley Jansen going to be moved? But the Red Sox, like you mentioned before, did make a couple other moves for pitchers, and Craig Breslow is a pitching guy. So coming up, we're going to be discussing those pitching moves that the Red Sox made and why they are going to be beneficial moving forward for a guy like Craig Breslow, who is pitching first. But I need to tell you a little bit about Prize Picks because this app is so much fun. I've gotten so addicted to it over the last few months or so. It's America's #1 daily fantasy sports app with over 5 million active members. And the best thing about Prize Picks is there's so many different sports on there. And even when it seems like it's a slow time for sports right now, you can make the most of it with baseball, WNBA, when they come back from the Olympic break here, which, by the way, I love the Olympics too. Hope you're all enjoying that out there as well. But you can make tons of money by checking out Prize Picks today. You can literally win up to 100 times your money with as little as 4 correct picks. So it really could be life-changing money for you. All you have to do is just download the Prize Picks app today and use code LOCKEDONMLB for a first deposit match up to $100. That's code LOCKEDONMLB on Prize Picks for a first deposit match up to $100. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy. You control your fate here, and it's really not scary and more fun than anything because you can win lots of money. So check that out today. Also, check out Locked On Sports today on YouTube or Amazon Fire TV and the free Fire TV channels app. If you're looking to stay caught up in all things going on in sports, it will make sure that you are getting the biggest stories, and it'll save you so much time from having to just scroll through everything on Twitter with all of our experts here at Locked On, keeping you up to date on everything. So make sure you check that out today as well. Here on Locked On Red Sox / Locked On Red Sox Postcast, as we are doing a little crossover.
Those are tongue twisters
Today. Yeah, try saying that 10 times fast, really, and let me know how you do on that. But we've had a great time, so far here talking about the Red Sox trade deadline so far and the moves that they have made. And Craig Breslow is a pitching first guy. I mean, that was his position. That was what he was brought here originally to do, was try to just develop pitching. And the Red Sox farm system was lacking pitching depth for a while, and they did make a move yesterday that was more of a minor league type of move, trading a minor league prospect for a minor league prospect. They essentially traded a second base prospect in Nick Yorkie for a pitching prospect in Quinn Preister, who definitely has some upside at the major league level, but isn't somebody necessarily who is going to likely impact the team right now. But this to me was a move more for the future that Breslow and company can hope to develop, and hopefully he can turn into somebody who can contribute down the road on the major league roster.
Yeah, and Gabby, Tom Caron, who does pre and post on Nesson for the Red Sox, had it last night. Others might have had it, but Tom, I saw his tweet first, so I give him the credit for it. Preister is younger than just about every pitcher at the Red Sox level in terms in some level. He's only 23 years old. He's younger than a majority of the pitchers. I think every single pitcher at AAA right now and most of the pitchers at AA. He's got big league experience over the last couple of years. Don't know if you saw the video, but he's with AAA Worcester right now. He was in the dugout, sitting on the dugout bench and with the media earlier today. So is Tristan Casas. And Priester's a guy that, I like the fact that they're going to start him down there. Let him get his feet wet a little bit. Get him some innings. See what he does well. They may want to say, "Hey, we want you to throw this pitch more. We want you to throw this pitch less," based on our philosophy of what we're doing. We talked about Danny Jansen in the beginning. I said it the other day on our Locked On Red Sox postcast. Jansen's going to come in. I bet you there's a pitcher or two where he says, "Hey, I'm glad you never threw this pitch, but it's nasty. I want to see it more. So when I put it down or the pitch com or whatever, I want to see that pitch." So Jansen can add to that as well. But Priester is a guy who has got great upside. You mentioned it's one first rounder for another first rounder. You saw the headline yesterday, the Pirates deal from a position of strength, pitching. No, nobody's got pitching strength, pitching depth. It doesn't exist. But York was a guy in the minors. There's a lot of guys around him as well. He's a guy who, you keep at AAA. He's going to go get an opportunity in another organization. And the Pirates did some moves today. So York is a guy who's going to go to spring training next year, probably battling for a job. And who knows, maybe he's in the big leagues at some point this season. They'd have to put him on the 40-man roster. But I love the arm, and I love that he's young. Sims will get into, Garcia will get into. We've talked about Paxton. Those guys can walk at the end of the year. But Priester's a guy who's under control, and that's a great add because from the Red Sox standpoint, you did subtract with York going the other way in terms of infield depth at the minor league level.
Yeah, and the thing with York too is there just wasn't going to be an opportunity for him to be
too many guys in front of him.
Major league roster. There's just too many guys that are in infield positions right now in the farm system. They just have a ton of talent there. And if they were going to trade him, now is the time to trade him because he's having a great season and his value is very high. So it wouldn't really have made sense to kind of keep him around in the system when they have other talent in that area coming up over the next few years. So it makes sense for them to make the move now when they did.
Can I give you one here? I don't know if you saw this. There were a couple of tweets in the 5 o'clock hour. Jackson Holiday from the Orioles was scratched from AAA Norfolk. Okay, we can move on from that one. But tell you that one to tell you this one. John Paul Morosi, and he came back and not retracted it, but just corrected it. He put Roman Anthony was scratched.
I saw that.
You saw that. He was
scratched
from the lineup.
Wait. No.
Yeah, a lot of people are like, well, what's going on here? And he wasn't in the lineup today. So being a minor league guy, I worked in minor league baseball for many years as the PR guy and a minor league broadcaster. There were 2 years in a row. I was in Kinston, North Carolina one year. There were 2 lineups that we handed into the public address announcer because this one guy was going to be moved, an outfielder. And Jeff Diamond, the public address announcer, announced the wrong lineup, and our broadcast position was very close to the dugouts. Our manager, Billy Gardner Jr., was death staring me through the window from the dugout. It meant nothing, and I told him a million times, whatever lineup you turn in, that's the lineup you use. That's the lineup that's official. This one up here is not official by any means. Jeff apologized. Jeff went down and did that. But it was probably crazy today. And the Roman Anthony one, hook, line, and sinker, I bought it. I'm like, okay, something big's happening. Didn't happen to happen.
Yeah, when you hear a name like that, somebody from that big 3 that the Red Sox have just been made super clear they are not moving. If you hear that name, it's natural to be like, okay, they must have made some big trade for some really high caliber player if they're moving him. So I was freaking out a little bit, but I was so glad when they were like, don't worry, this is not deadline related. I was like, okay, thankfully that's
so was there a name that popped into your head?
Not initially. No, okay. I was like, it could be somebody like Eric Crochet. Like I was like, because they had mentioned that they were interested in him. So like, what if they did pull off a trade for him and they were willing to part ways with Roman Anthony? Like that's the type of player I would picture them getting if they had to move somebody like him.
Because I was thinking Skubal. I really was. Just in the beginning when I saw it, I was like, oh, good. Skubel's coming to the Red Sox. Sign him up. What number is he wearing?
Yeah, right. I mean, it would have been nuts, but I don't think the Red Sox are willing to make any
Yeah.
sort of trade that would involve diving into that group of players. So, yeah, definitely freaked me out for a little bit, but the Red Sox have definitely focused a lot on pitching in general at this deadline. And they did earlier today acquire reliever Lucas Sims from the Cincinnati Reds in exchange for pitching prospect Ovis Portis, who is going back to Cincinnati, and also to make room on the 40-man roster, the Red Sox DFA'd left-hander Brandon Walter to make room for him. And I actually like this move a lot because Sims is somebody who, one thing to keep in mind is there is a big discrepancy between his ERA at home and his ERA on the road.
Right.
So that's definitely something of note that I'm keeping an eye on here. But in terms of the value that he brings, he definitely is going to help this bullpen out a lot, especially with the condition that it's in right now.
Traded at the deadline for the second time in his career for Lucas Sims, former first rounder by the Braves, was traded from Atlanta to Cincinnati a few years back. And I like him. Now the walks are, you kind of look at him like, okay, is he going to come in a situation where he's got a couple of runners on base and all of a sudden a walk and now the bases are loaded? But he also has got a nice strikeout total as well for the season. And when the Red Sox in June were in Cincinnati, that was just one of those names I kind of looked at like, maybe he gets moved at some point in time. I like it. And again, it's another guy as the Red Sox continue with Andrew Bailey, who you talked to recently, and with Craig Breslow, both pitching guys. They're developing their philosophy. Is it one size fits all? No. But Priester, we just touched on, he's going to go to AAA. They're going to get reports on him. They're going to get video on him. They're going to say, hey, we'd like to see you do this. And I think he's going to be up in the big leagues. Probably, I would dare say between the 15th of August and September 1, he's going to be up with them. And if they extend him as a starter, he goes there. But Sims, it's an interesting arm. But, all of a sudden, some of these guys that we've seen day in, day out, we're not going to see some of these guys because you're getting Garcia, you're getting Sims in the fold in the next couple of days.
Yep. Yeah. And it's interesting you mentioned Garcia because that was a late trade that was
still looking to see who the package is.
As the deadline here was concluding. And I did see something on Twitter saying the Red Sox are sending 4 prospects back in return for Luis Garcia. Who those prospects are, I am unsure, but 4 is a good amount of prospects for Luis Garcia. I don't know what caliber those prospects are, but that's what I'm getting right now.
I'm thinking if it's 4, it's quantity. It's a number. It's a big number of 4 for a reliever who's 37 years old for the end of the season instead of quality.
I can agree that they're probably lower end prospects.
Yeah.
Because you don't hear 4 prospects and be like, oh, they got rid of 2 top 10 prospects for him because they wouldn't have needed to give up 4 prospects if that was going to be the case anyway. So I'm not thinking they're super high end prospects. And you know what I loved about the Red Sox at this trade deadline is they made moves that they were trying to make without diving too deep into their farm system. They moved guys who were depth options that maybe down the road could have had a spot possibly, but they didn't really have to dive too much into their top high-end prospects that they know are going to be pieces to the puzzle down the road. And Garcia's an interesting move as well, and I'm not really surprised that the Red Sox did tack on another pitching move here as the deadline was approaching its end, because I really, even after the Sims trade, I was saying we really could use one more arm.
So it's coming across, and I don't know if this is MLB Pipeline, Baseball America, SoxProspects.com. Matthew Lugo is the top guy going back to the Angels, and he's ranked right now. Again, I don't know where that's from, but number 17. So,
yeah.
Okay. But again, you're adding 20 new players to the organization as they've signed every player from the 2024 draft. All 20, I believe, I saw from Alex Spear earlier today, all 20 are signed. So you're losing some players, but again, Lugo is a guy who's a couple of years away. So for a rental, all these moves, 4 though, that's a big number, but they're not in the top 10. They're not in the top 15. And again, Lugo, who knows, somebody might really like him and say, hey, next year, he would have been in the top 10 in the future. I have a hard time believing that because from this draft class, going down this road just real quick, Gabby, from this draft class, just looking at it, I would think that the top 4 guys are going to be the top 2 guys. Might be Montgomery's the top guy is going to be in the top 10. The pitcher they got, Tolley, I believe, he's going to be top 15, top 20 in terms of being an arm. And then, there's a handful of other guys behind the top 3 or 4 picks. They're going to be in somebody's top 30 here, whether it's the rest of the season or in the offseason.
Yeah, it's always interesting to know, too, because you really are taking a gamble in general when it comes to these prospects, because you don't really know how they're going to pan out anyway. And, it is better sometimes to just go for these proven guys that kind of what they're giving you. And that's what teams that are buying do. And I know sometimes it's hard for people to part ways with some of these prospects, but at the end of the day, do you know these prospects were going to pan out for you down the road as it is? And people wanted the Red Sox to buy. And sometimes that means parting ways with guys in the minor league system that you might have liked, but that's just part of the whole process.
Yeah. And it's a part of the process that's gone on for decades. It really has.
Yeah,
and
really
if Lugo goes to the Angels and has a great big league career, more power to him. That's terrific for him.
Good for them.
That's down the road. That's way down the road.
Yeah, exactly. And the Angels are, in a spot where they need guys like that. So it kind of makes sense for both teams. But coming up, we're going to be giving our final grades on this Red Sox trade deadline and what it means for them moving forward. So make sure you stick around for that. Get supplies from the site that's made for the skilled trades, SupplyHouse.com. SupplyHouse.com is the reliable way to order plumbing, HVAC, and electrical products online. Their easy-to-use website is packed with helpful resources and the latest product info to help you get the job done right. Shop a complete inventory of over 200,000 parts from over 400 top brands and get your order delivered right to your door with fast shipping from coast to coast. Need help with an order? Get expert support and industry-leading service from the friendliest folks in the business and talk to a real person every time. Pros in the skill trees and get a competitive edge by joining SupplyHouse.com's free Trademaster program. Every Trademaster gets access to a dedicated phone line, free shipping, and discounts on every order. Join the thousands of trade pros already benefiting from their free membership at SupplyHouse.com/T-M and order plumbing, HVAC, and electrical supplies from anywhere with just a few clicks at SupplyHouse.com. Well, Steve, it's been a fun few days, really, here in terms of trade deadline moves. Not so much of a fun last week or so for the Red Sox as they have struggled overall out of the gate coming back from the All-Star break, but scored 14 runs last night against the Mariners. Hopefully they saved some of that offense for the rest of this series. But when you look at now where the Red Sox are at, do you feel like they left any stones unturned at this trade deadline? Were there any moves that you feel they should have made that they did not?
I would have liked one more right-handed bat. But again, knowing what we know, that Casas is coming back. Yes, he swings from the left side. And the potential, Slayton, Martin, Hendricks. I will admit, I'm putting a lot of the eggs in the basket of Liam Hendricks. I really am. Even if it's, a slow return and he comes back in September and then he's fresh, hopefully there are no bumps in the road there for him. But I'm putting a lot of my eggs in the basket for Liam Hendricks. I think he can have a tremendous impact come September and perhaps a deep run into October as well. One more right-handed bat, but then again, Gabby, I've really kind of fallen in love with what they have. So, a couple of these, as I mentioned it earlier, a couple of these relievers that we've seen over and over and over again, they've been worn out. If they have options or going back to AAA, I think we talked the other day when we were on the phone. Jamie Westbrook's been a great story, but if they're going to add, if Casas comes back, Westbrook might be a guy who goes down and we don't see him again. From that standpoint, if they added another bat here in the last 24 hours, he might have been DFA'd. I don't know where they would have been on that. But with the guys that they have right now, I'm simply, in terms of the lineup, I'm ready to move forward for the August, September, and into October with what they have. Because what I love about this team, Yoshida's done it, Dom Smith has done it, Romy Gonzalez has done it, Westbrook has done it. They've contributed in a positive way. And those role guys are doing that. If they continue to do that during the rest of the regular season, I think this team's in a great spot. I really do. You mentioned Tyler O'Neill earlier. I've been like this with Tyler O'Neill, and sometimes I'm like this.
So inconsistent.
Sometimes I'm like this with my 15-year-old and my 17-year-old, right? and I've said it again before on our Locked On Red Sox postcast, the Red Sox would not be in a market in the last couple of weeks for right-handed bat if Tyler O'Neill, his numbers were very similar, home runs, RBIs, to Rafael Devers during the Miami series a few weeks ago. He fell off because it's feast or famine with Tyler O'Neill. We saw it last week. 3 games in a 6-game span where he had 2 home runs. Now, I'm not expecting that in another 6-game span this year, but end up near 75, 80 RBIs. You should be up where Devers is in terms of RBIs. You had your opportunities. Tyler O'Neill, to me, is a big bat the rest of the way for the Red Sox. And if you moved him down and Casas comes back, he might bat down on the lineup a little bit. You got to break up the left-handed batters. They have a lot of them in the lineup, right? They have a lot of lefty hitters in the lineup. But Tyler O'Neill, for me, you can move him down a little bit. He's still going to get opportunities. But if he can hit 70, 80 RBIs for the rest of the season, the Red Sox are going to be in a good spot.
Yeah, it's tough because that is an if. Like, the if is important there, and there are guys who have to step up and do their job. But I think going into this season, the whole season in general was a big if for the Red Sox. There were lots of things that had to go right for this team in order for them to be where they're at now. Because going into the season, I wasn't overly confident in the roster that they had, because I said a lot of things have to go right. I mean, nobody expected this rotation to be doing as well as they're doing right now. And I just hope they don't break into old habits like we have started to see them do a little bit of since we've gotten back here from the All-Star break. I just hope they can keep those feet on the gas and keep doing what they're doing, because a lot of these guys are starting to really figure out their role on this team, including somebody who we haven't really mentioned a lot of yet in David Hamilton, and him being able to really understand what his role is on this baseball team and how they can best utilize him. And that has been a big difference to me too in the way this team has performed this year. And obviously also the improvement of Sadam Rafaela and just Wilyer Abreu and you know, just what he's been doing this season for this team too. So there are lots of guys who have really stepped up this year, like you mentioned, and we just need to keep that going. And I think with the bullpen here too, we're going to see the bullpen do a lot better, because it's unacceptable for the Red Sox to continuously score 6, 7, 8 runs and not be able to win those games. And that's a lot of what they were doing. They were generating offense over this last week plus. They just weren't getting the pitching support with them because the pitchers were giving up lots of runs and they were losing these games. And I think we're going to start to see with these new additions, and like you mentioned with Liam Hendricks coming back, I think we're going to see some vast improvements from this bullpen here as these guys get involved in the action.
Yeah, there are going to be a couple of guys in the bullpen we don't see again for the rest of the season, who we've seen a lot of. I think with the last 10 days, and it started with, you know, Alex Cora re-signing and not hitting the free agent market as a manager during the offseason, it seems like everyone is on the same page now. And we were sort of on pins and needles and on the edge of our seat to say, you know, one hand doesn't know what the other hand is doing. We're out here grinding. You know, we don't have enough in the bullpen right now. We hit a great big, you know, a bump in the road, you know, a pothole in the last, you know, since the All-Star break. But those guys were worn down. It was again, we're hitting this over and over, but it's a point that everyone's making. Those guys were worn down out of the All-Star break, used. And, you know, you had the 2, you know, tough heartbreak, you know, tough extra inning losses, one against the Dodgers, one against the Rockies. But, you know, it's Slayton, Martin, those guys are back. And what you've added in the last couple of days, you've got 5 or 6 different relievers. Now, we don't know all of how they've been used in their other teams, because every team, all 30 teams, have worn out their bullpens to some degree. But everyone's going to be amped up. Sims, Priester, if he gets to the big leagues here in 2024 with the Red Sox. Garcia goes from a team that's, you know, 14, 15, 17 games under 500 to a team that's right there in the mix. And they should all be ready to go. There's sort of that, you know, shot of adrenaline in the arm to say, this is what we're rolling with the rest of the way. You know, the front office did its job in terms of getting us pieces that we can go through the rest of the season, and knowing that they're guys who are establishing themselves as solid big league players, you know, and all-stars and future all-stars too. It's all right there, you know. And then, you know, Craig Breslow has another offseason, and next offseason will be entirely different than what 23 into 24 was for him, because now he's got a better assessment of the minor league system. He's got a draft, and he's got his first trade deadline in the rearview mirror.
Yeah, and I think, too, from a confidence standpoint, these guys now feel like the front office showed that they believe in them to make a run for the rest of this season. And mentally, I think that's huge because a lot of these players had expressed their feelings on it and saying they wanted the Red Sox to be buyers at the deadline and just add pieces to help them make a run. And that is what they did, was they added to this team. They didn't get rid of guys who are currently making this all happen right now. And I think from a clubhouse standpoint, that's got to feel good to all these guys and sends a message to them like, okay, they believe in us. And so we know they're behind us, so we can go and we can make this happen. And so I think the clubhouse vibes in general are going to be really good after this trade deadline has ended because they added pieces as opposed to subtracting.
Yeah, and you and I, we cover the Red Sox every day. Are we in the clubhouse? No, but clubhouse access isn't what it used to be anyway. So from that standpoint, this is a very good clubhouse, and that's from Alex Cora and his entire coaching staff, and it's the leaders of the team as well. I mean, have we heard a single headache in this clubhouse this year? They all get along. I mean, night in, night out. They're on the top. They're watching the game. They're on the. They're right there on the top rail of the dugout. They're celebrating when guys, do well, and they're picking guys up when they're not doing well. And you get on the plane from LA to Denver last week and you're down. Kenley Jansen blew a couple of saves. You're not going to have Jansen in Colorado. You'll leave Colorado with a 20-7 loss and you've just re-signed your manager. Big part of the future. So, the ebbs and flows, the ups and downs, we know they're daily. James Paxton goes out there tonight, throws, 7 innings or six or 7 innings of 2-run baseball. A majority of us are going to have the Red Sox in the World Series in October. Now, if he goes out there and throws 3 innings, Craig Breslow didn't do enough.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, and it you won't really know until they start playing with these guys on this roster and, seeing how they perform with them. But final letter grade before we close out here on the trade deadline, if you had to consider everything they did right now.
I want to go A-, but I'm going B+.
Yeah, that's around the ballpark I was thinking too. I think they could have done a little bit more, but I think overall, considering everything, Craig Breslow kind of stuck true to what he said he was going to do generally. Yeah. And I really appreciate and respect that because we haven't always seen that. So I do appreciate that. So I'm going to go B+ too. I think, they could have done a little bit more, but I'm hoping that these pieces they added really can help them make a run. And I'm looking forward to seeing how that all pans out. But Steve, this was awesome. So fun to be able to connect with you and do a combined show. Everybody, thanks so much for making Locked On Red Sox your first listen of every day. If you want to know about more trades that happened across the league, hear about what the other teams look like now, check out Locked On MLB with Paul Sullivan, aka Sully. Super funny, loud guy, but loves baseball and is really passionate about it. And he can give you a good overview on what the other teams did, maybe some teams that are right neck and neck with the Red Sox, perhaps for a playoff spot. So be sure to check that out as well. And like I always say at the end of every show, keep the faith and go Red Sox. And I will catch you next time.